I'm the president and CEO of the Alexandria Economic Development Partnership. AEDP is happy to host this meeting to provide you all a forum for the business community of Alexandria to interface directly with the Small Business Administration. Today, we are very thankful to have with us David, who is an economic development specialist with the SBA's Washington Metropolitan Area District Office. And I'm going to turn it over to David here in a couple of seconds. I also wanted to acknowledge that we are joined by our Alexandria Small Business Development Center, which many of you know, as you've reached out to them for assistance and information related to the various federal grants and loan programs available. We encourage you to continue reaching out to the SBDC and AEDP. You can find our contact information at growalx.com/business. Over the past month, our team has been identifying resources and information most needed by the Alexandria business community and finding the best ways to deliver that to you all. Today's webinar is an example of that. As a reminder for everyone involved, this is an open meeting. It's relatively public. Many of you probably recognize each other, but know that we're going to be recording this session and be providing it on our website moving forward. There also may be members of the press on this call, so just keep that in mind as you make comments or submit questions. We're going to ask you, first we're going to invite David to give an overview of the status of the various federal SBA programs, and then we're going to follow it by a Q&A session, which I will facilitate. We encourage you to ask questions using the chat function, which you can find at the bottom of your screen or phone. If you have something that you'd like to share with the group instead of a question, we ask that you raise your hand. The way that you do that is you go to the chat function, and under the participants section, there's a way for you to raise your hand, and we'll call on you when we get to that portion of the meeting. We have an hour scheduled with David. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to him. I think my colleague's going to be able to give him control of the session.
All right, this is David. I want to test first, make sure everybody can hear me. All right, good. Okay, so status update. It's all bad news. Until the Congress, the House, the Senate, and the President get on the same page, everything is hearsay, and I actually don't read the news about it. I don't know what they're proposing. I've heard different numbers. None of it matters until it gets signed by the President and then becomes law. So I can give an overview of the PPP, and I can give an overview of the EIDL for those of you who don't already know about it. So, and then we'll go straight into questions and answers, because I figure everyone will learn more that way than me giving another PowerPoint, which is why I'm not going to do one. Also, I've done it 100 times in the last 4 weeks, and I know it by heart. So the EIDL is the older of the two programs. It's the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program. It has existed for years, and its purpose is to give businesses that have suffered some economic injury, in other words, a severe or total loss of revenue, working capital for 6 months. 6 months of working capital in the form of a low interest loan with a long term, up to 30 years, 3.75% interest. We have streamlined the application process for when it reopens, if it reopens. And it is just, give us your gross revenues for the year, the previous year, or the previous 12 months. If you were not open all of 2019, you can go from February 2015, February 2020, and then go back 12 months. And give us your gross revenues, give us your cost of goods sold, or for a service business, the equivalent, your cost of revenue, subtract, that's for the year, your working capital, what we're calling it. Divide by 2, that's 6 months. So that would be the loan amount. Now, a new feature of it is there is a loan advance that is available of up to $10,000. So it's really $1,000 per employee. And that's an advance that comes to you and it's totally forgiven. You don't have to pay it back. So effectively, it becomes a grant. All right, processing time for that used to be 18 to 21 days. It is now more like 30 to 32 days. And then about once, if it's a yes and they offer you the loan, then about 4 or 5 days to fund it, because they're going to send you loan documents and then you sign them, send them back, and then it gets funded. Okay. You can use that loan because it's older than the PPP. You could use it for payroll. You could use it for fixed costs, debts, obligations you have that you have to satisfy to keep the business solvent, to keep it open, basically. All right, so now the new program. Oh, and the first payment for that is deferred for 12 months. So you don't have to begin paying for 12 months, although the interest is accruing during those 12 months. All right. The PPP is the newer of the two programs, and that's the one that passed in the CARES Act. And that is the Paycheck Protection Program. Its purpose is to protect paychecks, protect payroll. That is a completely forgivable loan as long as you use at least 75% of the loan money for payroll and payroll costs. I'll explain that in a moment. If you do that and you keep your employment level, the number of employees you have, the same as it was in 2019 or for the 12 months preceding February 2020, and you keep the compensation levels the same, meaning the pay levels the same, for 8 weeks after you get the loan, then the loan is completely forgiven because the purpose of the loan is to pay your payroll and payroll costs. Even if your employees cannot come to work because the city or the state or the county shut you down because it's dangerous to stay open, even if your employees cannot come to work because you don't want them to come to work because you want to keep them safe, even if they can only come to work a little bit, the whole point of it is for you to pay the complete payroll so that they don't lose their income. And since the government, broadly speaking, state, local, federal, is the one shutting you down, or the emergency is causing you to lose revenue so you can't pay them, well, the government offers you this loan. The loan is completely forgiven. If you maintain the payroll, keep paying everybody. All right. Payroll costs includes things like vacation pay, sick pay, medical leave, holiday pay, whatever, those are payroll costs. If you have county or state payroll taxes, those are payroll costs. You can use the loan for that, that's payroll costs. Federal payroll taxes are excluded from this. Now, you could use a loan for other things. Remember, I said you have to use at least 75% for payroll and payroll costs. You can use it for other things. As long as you don't go above 25% for other things, and you use at least 75% for the payroll and payroll costs, the loan is completely forgiven. And you keep the other condition. You keep people employed, you keep them on your payroll for 8 weeks after the loan is approved. And those are for the people who got their applications in before it had to be stopped because it ran out of money. The interest rate on that is 1%. The loan term is 2 years if you don't get it forgiven, right? Because you didn't meet the conditions. It is available to sole proprietors and independent contractors. So is the EIDL, or EIDL as we call it, the Economic Injury Disaster Loan. There are rules on how to calculate what's the payroll. That's not really a word you use with a sole proprietor. What we are talking about then is their net earnings. There are rules for this in the interim final rule and in the additional eligibility criteria documents, which have been published in the Federal Register. They're on our website for the PPP, which is sba.gov/PPP. Go down to the bottom to forms and guidance. There's links there, PDFs, download them, reading. It is not the most thrilling reading, but it's short, and if it's going to save your business, it's worth reading. Okay. This is what happened last week. The EIDL program has existed for years. We had an appropriation from Congress from a while back, way before this pandemic. And that appropriation, you know, we calculated sort of the way insurance companies calculate how many payouts they're going to have to do. So we think, well, there's going to be a couple of hurricanes, there's going to be fires in California, like there always is. There's going to be earthquakes, maybe, things like that. And we have enough money to cover that. And, you know, there might be 25 counties around the country that are affected. Well, now it's every county in every state and territory in the United States and every parish in Louisiana. We ran out of money. So we had to stop taking applications because we have over, and I'm not exaggerating this number, I know the number because I have friends who work in the Office of Disaster Assistance, we have over 3 million applications. Then the PPP was passed. It had $349 billion, and it ran out of money in 13 days. So we stopped taking applications. If the House and the Senate and the President can all agree on something, then we will get more money and we will start taking applications again. All right, that's my update. What are your questions?
Fantastic. Thank you, David. I am going to start asking you some of the questions. And again, if anyone would like to speak, you can raise your hand. But the first question I'll ask is, will applications that were in process when SBA ran out of funds last week need to reapply?
No. If you have your application in for the EIDL, if you pressed the submit button and you got an application number, I'm wagging on my finger at all of you, which you should have written down, then it'll be processed.
Fantastic. So I think this is sort of a follow-up question. Will the banks have to resubmit the forms that were originally completed? And is there any anticipation that a form would change?
So the PPP goes through the bank or an online lender for sole proprietors and independent contractors who do not have business accounts with banks because banks don't give them one. So you put in the application with your bank. They're going to send it. They make the loan decision because the PPP is a guaranteed loan from the SBA. And as with all SBA loans, the lender makes the loan decision themselves according to their credit underwriting rules. If they decide to do the loan, then they send it to us, and we're going to process it very quickly, actually. The delay is really not going to be with us. We're going to give them then the loan number, and then once you have that, then you know, okay, it's approved, got the loan number, it's going to be funded. It's supposed to, according to the legislation, it's supposed to be funded within 10 days. So if you had that before they shut down applications for it, then it's going to be processed and you're going to get the funding. If not, then your bank will probably resubmit it, but I don't know. Every bank has its own procedures. You will have to get in touch with them. Yes, I know it will be nearly impossible to get in touch with them because they're doing most of their, from what I've heard from business owners, is they're doing most communications around PPP through email because they just don't have enough people to answer all the phone calls.
Right.
But you're going to have to find out from them. For us, with the EIDL, you can call the customer service number, and that is a 24/7 number. So call, and I'm not kidding, call at 1 in the morning. Because I know that there are people have told me they went on it and they were on hold and it said they were number 2,343 in the queue, right? But you know, if you call at 1 in the afternoon, that's what's going to happen. So it's a 24/7 number. Call at a non-peak time, and that number is 800-659-2955. 800-659-2955.
Excellent. So we had a couple of questions that asked about the ability to amend the loan amount requested. Since a month has passed since many people submitted their requests, the 12-month payroll look-back period might change depending on when loans actually get processed. Do you have any thoughts about that and if there's going to be an ability to amend? Did I stump you, David? Okay, it looks like we lost David there for a second. We're going to give him a second to get back into the meeting. In the meantime, I'll answer. There's a question in the chat about whether state or local government will be providing grants. Both the state and local government are they're two very different processes. Both frankly based on the same issue, are looking at what sort of revenue projections look like and what resources might be available as reimbursements through the CARES Act to both the state and local government. We anticipate that next week, the Alexandria City Council will be reviewing some recommended grant programs to assist the City of Alexandria business community. At the state level, we're probably a couple of weeks away. The state budget is being reconsidered on Wednesday. The governor made some adjustments based on this very influential change in state revenues, and the General Assembly is reconvening on Wednesday to consider some amendments to the budget that he proposed. He did mention specifically some assistance for the business community, and in particular, industries like hospitality, retail, and restaurants, who were most impacted by this. So more to come on that, and I'll just say from our perspective at AEDP, as any information about that becomes available, we certainly will communicate that through the website that we included in the chat function. But depending on how significant any programs might end up being, we could certainly prepare to have another session like this to explain any local or state grant programs that come to fruition. I think we got David back. David, can you hear me? Okay, we're continuing to try to get David back. I'm looking through the other questions to see if there's anything else I can answer. One of the last questions that came in was looking for advice to those who are just starting to work on obtaining loans or grants for their businesses. I sort of said at the beginning, and I'll reiterate here, our SBDC team has been working through SBA programs for multiple decades, the EIDL specifically, and then obviously has become very knowledgeable about the PPP. If you have not engaged with the Virginia SBDC network, and specifically the Alexandria SBDC, we would recommend you reach out to them immediately as you're working to start your loan and grant process. AlexandriaSBDC.org. You can also find their information via the link that we provided in the chat.
All right, are we back online?
Okay, great, David. Yes, you're back. Fantastic.
Okay, cool. Next question.
Okay. So, so the question was about the time that's passed since people have put in their initial PPP applications. Since the application asked for a 12-month payroll look back, it's possible that an entire month or more might have passed. And so the question is about whether there's an ability to amend their loan request.
I'm not exactly sure what they mean. Let me talk a little bit and we'll see if that answers a question.
Okay.
So for the calculation of the PPP, it's right there in the interim final rule. There's a I'm staring at it right there. It's got an example of a method to calculate it, and it gives you 4 examples. Now, if you were in business all of 2019, you just use the 2019 figures. If you were not in business for all of 2019, let's say you started later in the year, you could use the rest of 2019, whatever you did in 2019, plus January and February to get this average for yourself. So when they ask, a month has passed, I think what they're asking is, I'm going to guess that they had to lay off some people or furlough some people over a month ago, and so now their payroll numbers are lower. So I'm going to go back to what the intent and purpose of the PPP is. The intent and the purpose of the PPP is to be able to keep everybody on the payroll and paid. So you're going to use the numbers from before the emergency. And this is for the EIDL as well. If you were only open, so in the EIDL, let me step back. For the EIDL, a loan decision is based on the credit score of the borrower and the cash flow of the business. There's no collateral requirements. We will not decline an EIDL for not having collateral. So if all you have to demonstrate is the second half of 2019, because you started in July and you have the first month and a half of 2020, that's fine. Same thing for the PPP, if that's what you have. But all that is before the emergency, and before the emergency means before February 15, 2020, because that's the number that's throughout the interim final rule and the CARES Act. Everything goes back to February 15, 2020. So I assume what they're saying is, it's been a month, we have fewer people. How do we calculate payroll costs with this fewer people? You don't. You calculated payroll costs from before the emergency.
Great. So next question is the EIDL program also out of money?
Yes.
Great. The next question is, I'm not sure you'll know this, but what are fees being charged by the banks to process the PPP loan?
There should be no fees from the banks. It's in the legislation. It's in the rules.
Right.
Oh, let me add, if people are charging you money, if there's anybody out there, because I've seen this already, it really makes me crazy. People setting up websites and everything like, let us do your application, it'll go faster. That is all BS. No one can make your application go faster. No one has an in, no one has a buddy or anything at the SBA to make this go faster for you. It is slow because there are millions of people trying to get this help.
David, while you were rejoining, we pointed out that the best kind of resource for businesses to reach out to you is our SBDC partners and your economic development partners. That, you know, we are the ones who are providing free services and guidance and are keeping up to speed on the ever-changing legislation to be able to pass that information along to them.
Yes, the most reliable source of information is going to be the SBDC, the Women's Business Center, the Veterans Business Outreach Centers, and the SCORE mentors, because they are all partly funded by the SBA, and we're in touch with them weekly, so they know what we know.
Excellent. Okay, technical question. Must the 8-week period for the fund usage begin the day that I receive the funds in my bank account?
Yes.
Okay, great. Can the 8-week period be backdated to February if I kept my staff on this whole time?
No, it does say it begins after you get the loan.
Okay.
I see the problem. They probably have people who weren't getting paid for a while, and now they get this. Yeah, that's probably what they're talking about.
Can people still apply now for future funding, considering whether or not new funding does become available, even though there are no funds currently?
For the EIDL, our portal, our loan application portal is closed. I mean, the website's still there. You're going to go there and get a notice and say, we're not taking new applications until we get more money. For the PPP, the banks as well. Now, the bank might be doing, because this is through them, they might be doing something else. Whoever you have your bank account with, they might say, listen, we expect there to be money, give us your details, and, you know, Maybe they're doing that. I don't know. I just know that whatever they're doing, they can't send it to the SBA, and we're not going to take it until there's money in the pot.
And while David, basically said he hasn't been reading news, I guess I will opine here and say that I have been reading a lot of news, and it sounds like the latest from reporting is that there's potentially a good amount of money coming back to both programs, and that the earliest that could be made official would be Wednesday when the House convenes.
Okay.
Next question is, can you have 2 applications pending for PPP and cancel one when you get an SBA number on one of them?
Okay, here's the deal. I hope you don't have that. Let me explain.
I won't tell you who asked that question.
Yeah. No, it's not their fault, but let me explain it, because I know, because I'd be doing it too. I'm like, all right, I'm gonna, it's like when you go to the grocery store with your friend, and you're like, all right, you get in that line, I'll get in this line, we see who gets there first. It doesn't work that way for us, because it's all gonna come to one place, the SBA. So the PPP is gonna come into the Office of Application, is gonna come into the Office of Capital Access. And then, so here is Stephanie in our Office of Capital Access. She gets this application from David. And it says, okay, this guy, this guy, this guy. And then she starts inputting it. And then a flag goes up. Wait a minute, David Hincapie in DC, what's going on? He's already got it up, but what the heck is going on? All right, so now Stephanie has to stop her work and go figure this out. And maybe it takes her 15 minutes, maybe it takes her 30 minutes. Whatever it is, it's 30 minutes that she's not working on processing this. And let's go back to the numbers. There are hundreds of thousands of these to do. So do not do it. It doesn't, first, you're only allowed to have one. My guess, it's just a guess, is nobody in Cap Access is going to think that you're trying to defraud the government. They're going to think, yeah, you're trying to figure out which line can get me there first. But don't do it. It'll slow things down. It's just gunk in the works. So you pick one, you stay with it. You could do it if you can be absolutely sure that the first one that you applied for, you get in touch with them, with a person, you tell them withdraw it, cancel it, delete it, erase it, make it go away, and then go to a new one. If you're not absolutely sure that you did that, don't do it. It'll just slow things down.
So I'll read the next question. I think it's probably more of a question for me, because it starts with, are we lobbying for? And that certainly is not David's job. But are we lobbying for any new PPP to be limited to those who don't have access to other sources of funding or who can demonstrate financial distress? And then it points out that this person has friends who represent venture capital and private equity firms who have a lot of funding available to them but still applied for the money. And I would guess people have read some headlines about some large corporations that received grants. I think the 3 that were in the news were Ruth Chris and Shake Shack. And there was concern that that's not what the intent was. And so unless you want to weigh in, David, I'll just say that as the local economic development entity and are in touch with our local elected officials, we have had conversations with Senators Warner and Kane over the last 2 weeks, and also with Congressman Beyer, to talk through what we were hearing about what in these first 2 weeks, what the pain points were, and direct feedback from you all as the business community. So we certainly have pressed for the intent of the legislation to be to get funds into the hands of people like you. And I would assume that that same lobbying has been happening in many districts across the country. And I think it's a lot of what's being debated now in the second round of funding.
Only thing I can say about that is we all took civics in high school. If you're a citizen, you can register to vote.
That's right. Can you clarify for the PPP, can a nonprofit apply for all its independent contractor staff, or must the independent contractors submit their own applications separately?
Yes, the independent contractors can qualify for are eligible to apply for their own PPP as well as their own EIDL.
Great. And I think you sort of talked about this earlier, but the question was there additional EIDL money allocated in the first government package? The answer is yes.
In the CARES Act?
Yeah, yes.
In the CARES Act, there was the addition to the EIDL that was the advances that turned into grants. That's right. So there was money for that.
Okay. Okay. The CARES Act section on the employee retention credit says that you cannot use the employee retention credit if you receive a PPP loan because there is no double dipping. No one has been able to provide a reasonable interpretation of whether you can take the employee retention credit on wages paid before obtaining a PPP loan. It doesn't seem like double dipping if you pay wages before the PPP origination and then stop claiming the employee retention credit on the wages that count for your PPP forgiveness. Is it a reasonable interpretation that you are not double dipping if you take the retention credit on wages before the grant?
I don't know.
Okay. And hey,
I mean,
you know,
you got to remember, they made up these rules, right?
That's
So
right.
the interim final rule, the PPP was passed before April 3rd, so the week before. And then 7 days later, we had the interim final rule that was published on very early in the morning on April 3rd, Friday. We did in 7 days, they put it together. And then 5 days later, or 4 days later, we got the additional eligibility criteria. And the CARES Act, you know, that was talked about for like 3 weeks, and it was a $2.1 trillion bill. So the interpretation of all of this, you know what? I'm with the SBA. I'm paying attention to these narrow details.
Mm-hmm. Great. Hey, we did not advertise this as David knows every answer, so you are. We fully appreciate that. The next question is: are owners able to pay themselves salary through payroll and qualify for forgiveness for that portion as well? And if
Yes.
so, is there a max?
In the PPP, well, there's going to be the $100,000 max like there is in the PPP. But here's the deal. So in the PPP, there's the interim final rule, and there's the additional eligibility criteria. And the additional eligibility criteria has information on how exactly to calculate that for now, broadly speaking.
David, we've lost you a little bit. It sounds like you're kind of in a.
Oh, sorry, I moved away to pick something up from the print.
There we go.
All right. So in the PPP, broadly speaking, the way we're thinking of the way it's written in the interim final rule and the additional eligibility criteria is that for a self-employed person, we're going to treat the net earnings as the payroll, right? And there's a way to calculate that, and they give you that in these 2 documents that I'm talking about that are on our website. So let me give you a little technical bit for some of the sole proprietors out there who might be listening to this, because I know there are a lot. The net earnings for many sole proprietors is much less than they think it's going to be, because sole proprietors are taking their gross revenue and, to coin a phrase, paying for their lives, right, with the gross revenues. And then they have deductions and stuff because they're sole proprietors or business people, and you can deduct a bunch of things and you end up with this adjusted gross income. So in the strict accounting of net earnings, there's often not a lot left. Whereas a salaried person like me, I'm paying for life with net earnings, right? So the difference is the benefits that you're getting for taxes because you're a sole proprietor, you can deduct and deduct and deduct and deduct, means in the strict accounting of net earnings, they're going to be very low. And remember, the way you calculate is you take those net earnings in the method, you take the net earnings for the sole proprietor or independent contractor, you divide by 12 to get the average for the month, or a monthly average, and multiply by 2.5. So here is the problem. That if your net earnings are $5,000, that's going to be a very low number. It doesn't mean you're living like a person making $5,000 a year. It just means that when you do the strict accounting for a self-employed person, you end up with very low net earnings. So for you, probably the EIDL is going to be the better one. You don't get the benefit of the full forgiveness, but there is another little technical problem. If your net earnings are under $4,800, you're not going to be able to we're not going to be able to process the PPP for you anyway. Because when you divide by 12 and multiply by 2.5, you get a loan amount under $1,000. And here's the problem. Our processing system cannot accept a loan amount under $1,000. Yes, you are eligible for it. But the practical problem is we cannot enter it into the computer. The system will not accept a loan amount less than $1,000. So this is why the PPP for someone with really low net earnings is probably not going to work. The EIDL is better.
I have a comment on here. I'm not sure if David would know this, but someone heard today that small business owners can apply for federal unemployment benefits.
No idea. I don't know.
Okay. So it's just a tip for people to look into. Question about someone who's an LLC with a payroll and has guaranteed payments for members of the LLC. How can we include our members' payroll, their guaranteed payments, if not included in our 2019 payroll reports?
So you have LLC people who have guaranteed payments. So these are the distributions they're getting, but are they also W-2 employees?
So I guess that would be the question for this person. So are you saying that if they are W-2 employees, then there is a path forward?
The PPP is for that. Now, for LLCs, it does talk about this in the additional eligibility criteria. It is on section, let me look at it here, section 3. Yep, section 3, the whole thing, section 3 is talking about that. And it's 1, 2, 3 pages of material on that go into it. The additional eligibility criteria tells you exactly how to calculate this for LLCs and partnerships. One of the important things is they're not doing it by individual partners. They're doing it as a whole for the LLC and it says this in the rule, to simplify the accounting and the intent, to meet the intent of the PPP.
Great. Question about if they call the SBA number that you provided, will they be able to get the status of their application, their EIDL application?
They should be able to get that information if they can get through. Okay. But I know people have had trouble getting through if they call in the, during peak hours in the middle of the day.
Yes. Clarifying question, if they've applied for a PPP, can they also apply for an EIDL?
Yes.
Okay. The question here about somebody who applied for an EIDL, but the application method changed a couple of times. If I applied but don't have a loan number, where can I go to find that?
Well, if you don't have a loan number, that means they haven't done a loan decision yet. The loan decision time is going to be 30. My best guess, way back in March, I remember in the middle of March, I knew that the normal loan decision time was 18 to 21 days. So this loan decision time is going to be 30 days. And it is turning out to be a pretty good prediction, because we know now there are people receiving loan documents or have received them in the last few days. So it's April 20th, and they applied on the 16th and the 17th. So it's about right. It's about 30 days to get the loan decision. So if you get the loan decision, you're going to get an email. The email is going to tell you when you get the loan decision, it's going to tell you to open an account on the portal, on the lender portal, right? That's how you know the loan decision is there, and so they'll invite you to open an account. You go there, and you get your information and loan documents there. If you don't have that, then that means it's not processed yet, no loan decision yet.
There's a question, another question about being able to apply for both, which you've answered, people can, but then an additional question about if you've already applied for PPP and will be spending those dollars on payroll, are there restrictions about what you can spend the EIDL funds on?
Okay, so here is something to pay attention to if you haven't already paid them for payroll. So in the calculation that you see in the interim final rule on how to get your loan amount for the PPP, I have it right here, the formula. Okay, so I'll go through this quickly, and then you can ask questions about it. You take your aggregate payroll costs, you subtract everything over 100,000, you divide by 12, multiply by 2.5. And then step 5 says, add the outstanding amount of an EIDL minus the amount of any advance, right? The forgivable advance that you're, okay? Add that amount to the PPP. If you want to refinance the EIDL, right? Because you're going to use, because you use that EIDL for payroll. And so you may want to do this, and you may have to do this because it also says in the interim final rule, if your idle loan was used for payroll costs, your PPP loan must be used to refinance your idle loan. It says this, must be. A lot of people haven't noticed this. It hasn't stood out to that many people because we just haven't had that many people get their loans yet. Okay. Proceeds from any advance up to $10,000 in the idle will be deducted from the loan forgiveness on the PPP because it was already forgiven. All right, so it says you must use it. Now here's why you might not want to do that. It sounds like a really great refinance because it's going to be a 1% PPP loan instead of a 3.75% idle loan. But the PPP loan, if you don't get it completely forgiven, whatever you have to pay in 2 years. Whereas with the idle, you have up to 30 years to pay it. Yes, it's a higher interest rate, but it's going to be a relatively easy loan to pay off. And you don't have to pay for a year, whereas with the PPP, the payment deferments are only 6 months. So you want to do a little bit of arithmetic and find out what's best for you. Right? I'm not saying one way or the other is better because I don't know the details of your business and your cash flow and what you expect to be making if you reopen, right? You know, if we reopen in mid-July and everybody's feeling safe and you have an ice cream shop, maybe you're going to make a ton of money. So you go ahead and refinance it because you can pay it off in 2 years. But if you have a different kind of business, maybe you won't expect to have your cash flow increase that quickly. So you don't want to pay it off in 2 years. You want to give it up to 30 years. So pay attention to these details to see what's going to be best for your business. I hope that answered it.
For sort of a related question, what sort of documentation is going to be required for proof of the PPP spending?
Oh, this is for the forgiveness part, right?
Correct. Correct.
So, yeah. So it says here that, let me see, look at it here. What certification made? Well, okay, they're going to want things like whatever's done from your payroll processing company. Whatever service that you use that's going to keep track of who you're paying, you're going to do that. And they're going to be able to match that up with, say, what you have in your 940 or 41 or 44 from the previous year, right? Oh, this many employees. Oh, okay, this much in payroll taxes, et cetera, et cetera. So those sorts of documents.
Okay. Okay, I have 2 clarification questions.
Yes.
According to an FAQ about what is the covered period of the loan, there's a statement that says borrowers can choose which 8 weeks they want to count towards the covered period, which can start as early as February 15th.
Oh, is the FAQ from where? From the Treasury?
They did not give me the source.
All right, so if you didn't download it from the Treasury or our website, be suspicious.
Okay.
And at the Treasury, they have their stuff at home.treasury.gov/CARES, as in CARES Act. And then you look for the small business assistance section there, and they got a bunch of Q&As and things there. I haven't seen that yet.
Okay, great. Well, that is a great tip to find the source. The second clarification is back, and I probably didn't ask this well enough. So you answered the question about how independent contractors can file for a loan themselves. A clarification question is, can a nonprofit who employs 1099 contractors, can the organization apply for a PPP to pay those contractors? Or is it only for W-2?
No, yeah, no, it's right there in the rule. I mean, this is question P in the section on this. Do independent contractors count as employees for purposes of PPP loan forgiveness? No. This is one of these rare, unequivocal answers in a government document. No. Independent contractors have the ability to apply for a PPP loan on their own, so they do not count for purposes of a borrower's PPP loan forgiveness. So those independent contractors should go for an EIDL if it opens up again, and go for their own PPP if it opens up again.
Great. Okay. Just reading through here, it looks like a lot of people asked this. Yes, so clarification, we don't get a loan number until we get a loan decision. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Great.
For the idle. Yeah.
Yeah, for the idle, exactly. Okay, great. For existing idle applications that have an application number and loan amount confirmed and a status saying that the application is being processed, are these applications still being processed, or is new congressional funding needed?
No, if they're being processed, that means they were in before the money ran out.
Okay, great. Couple more questions about, sort of the larger corporations that were able to receive these funds, and whether that will happen again with the next cash infusion. Again, not really a answer that David has.
Civics.
Exactly, civics. Someone,
Go register to vote.
Someone did ask about how much money is potentially coming. I can report, from the readings that I've been doing, where it looks like $310 billion is the second batch for PPP, and I think I saw 70 billion for idle. So again, following David's civics advice, let's stay in touch with our elected officials, but they're the ones who will be making those decisions this week.
And for the media on the call, don't get me in trouble. Right.
Exactly. Thank you.
Just reminding us of our rights as citizens.
That's right. Okay, I think I've made it through all of the questions. If anybody has additional questions, or has anybody raised their hand, I'm kind of asking my co-hosts to help out here. Do we have anybody waiting to speak?
Nope. The last thing I'll add is I'll remind everybody. Oh, I'm sorry.
Nope, no, we have no one waiting to speak.
Okay, so last thing is, look, a lot of your, I don't mind coming on and answering the questions for this particular case and this particular case, but just for your own peace of mind, if you're listening to this and you're applying and you want to know how it works and how much money you're going to get and the whole thing, for the PPP, the rules, the interim final rule and the additional eligibility criteria are right there online. You can read them. It's not the greatest reading. This is not a novel, but it's there in pretty plain English. So you'll have good answers there, and that'll put your mind at ease so you know what to expect and what your loan might be, and then you can begin planning.
I have one new question and one clarification question. So for an LLC or S Corp, can they use the proceeds of a grant to pay the owner's salary?
Okay. So for the EIDL is not meant to replace profits or lost sales. It is working capital for fixed costs and obligations, debts and obligations that you could have paid if there had not been a disaster. For the PPP, with regard to LLCs and sole proprietors, like a one-member LLC or a partnership or sole proprietors, it is meant to pay those net earnings. That's how they're characterizing it, right? Those net earnings for the owners. It doesn't say anything specifically about S corporations, so I'm not sure myself how to interpret it, given that for the IRS, LLCs don't exist. You have to file taxes as a partnership, or if you're an S corporation, you do it that way, right? So I'm not sure for S corporations. It depends on, well, how are they treating the money that the shareholders of the S corporation are getting? Is that profits? Because it's not meant for that. So I'm not sure.
Okay. What happens if you laid off an employee, you then receive a PPP? Do you have to bring them back full-time, or can you bring them back part-time?
Oh, I'm sorry, ask again.
So if someone laid off an employee, a full-time employee, then receives the PPP grant, they want to know if they can bring them back part-time or does it have to be full-time?
Why would they only bring them back part-time? The whole purpose of the PPP is for you to be able to pay your employee their full salary or wage while they cannot work either full-time or cannot work at all because it's dangerous. So I'm going to repeat, the intent of the PPP is to pay people when you don't have enough money to pay them. And if the reason you only want to bring them back part-time is because you don't have enough money to pay them, that's why you got the PPP. Pay them. Even if they can only work part-time. Like for example, I know some businesses that are doing sort of shifts. Right? They've got 5 people this week, and then they've got 5 people next week. So people are really only working half of what they used to work, but they're still using the PPP to pay them the full time. That's the point. So that you can pay them. If you do that, the loan is forgiven, no problems to you, and that way they don't go on unemployment benefits.
Great. The last couple of questions I see here is you mentioned a phone number for people to call and check the status. Is there an online option for them to check?
Yes, disaster customer service, all one string, disaster customer service at SBA.gov. Include your name on the application, the name of your business, your phone number, your email address, and your application number.
Excellent. One of the last questions I think is something that you addressed already. A couple of people had applications in with Wells Fargo. They were told to pursue another bank, so they put in applications with another bank, and they're asking if they should pull the original. I believe your advice was you should not have multiple applications and you should only have one.
I assume, so if Wells Fargo told you to go somewhere else, I assume it's because they just didn't have the capacity to process yours. That means my best guess is they didn't send it forward. That's why they told you to go somewhere else, because they just couldn't.
Got it. And I think if you could repeat one final time the online site that you just gave for EIDL, and we'll try to capture that and send it out to the group as well.
Yeah, the email address is disaster customer service at SBA.gov.
There we go. It's entered into the category. There is a question about if you receive, and we're kind of at our 5-minute warning here. So if you receive a loan, you rehire your staff and you bring them on, but then 8 weeks passes and you're still not able to reopen because of government restrictions. Are you able to furlough the staff again?
After the 8-week period?
Yes.
All 330 million of us in America are going to cross that bridge when we come to it.
Got it. Yep. I think we've covered. I think maybe the last question I saw here was if you don't. I think we might have covered this earlier. If we have not received a loan number from EIDL, how do we know the dollar amount to add to our PPP?
Well, you can add. Remember what I said about adding it to the PPP. Right? So if you add it, you're going to refinance it if you used it for payroll costs. But if you didn't use it for payroll costs, then you're not going to be able to use it for the forgiveness. The forgiveness is for payroll and payroll costs. So if you're using your whole EIDL for payroll costs, all right, you add it in, and then it's part of the forgiveness. But if you're not, if you're using it for the other fixed debts and obligations that you have, then don't add it. Now, you can get a rough calculation. You can get a calculation of what your EIDL loan amount is by just taking your gross revenues, subtracting cost of goods sold or cost of revenue for a service business, dividing by 2, because these are annual numbers. So divide by 2 to get 6 months. And then that's the loan amount.
Right. Okay, I think that we have covered all of the questions. The last few comments I see here are really just thank yous to David for us being able to have you here with us today. I think that on behalf of the group, I'll just say thank you for your honesty and your candor. The general impression that I've had and our teams have had is that everyone is frustrated, and so it's nice to talk to somebody who's involved in the program, who understands those frustrations, but is also being honest and forthright. So thank you for spending the hour with us. For those who still
Happy to do it.
For those who still have questions and want to continue to be engaged, please visit growalx.com/business or the alexandriasbdc.org. Those two websites, you will be able to get to team members of both AEDP and SBDC. And if you're not already working with us, we really want to be able to help you. And even if it's just allowing you to vent when sometimes you need to do that. So hang in there, everyone. And if we can be of help, please reach out. Thank you, David, very much.
Good afternoon, everyone. Bye-bye.